Good morning, everybody. This is just an incredible scene to be up here. I'm so grateful and honored to have the opportunity to be here with you all today. Earlier, I was out mingling with folks as everybody was gathering, and one of the folks that I was talking to mentioned, he said, "Isn't it incredible the amount of energy that seems to be buzzing here with all the folks that are in the room?" I said, "It truly is. You can almost touch it. You can certainly feel it. I can see it in people's faces when I'm engaging with them. I can hear it in folks' voices as we're talking about the day. You can almost taste it. But where does that energy sort of come from? Is it all the caffeine we've been pumping into you since you walked in this morning? Did we get the best night's sleep last night? I personally happen to know there's at least a half dozen of you that did not get the best night's sleep last night. Maybe we sprinkled a little 5-hour energy on that fruit salad you all been eating. Maybe we're pumping oxygen into the room just like the casinos, right? But no, that energy has always been and will always be within us and between us. A common vision or expectation for the Always On Symposium and what we get out of it is what's drawn it all together today into this concentrated space to the point where you can practically reach out and grab it. Now, we're all here to talk about culture, right? That's the big topic of the day. And if we can all agree that in order to create culture, it takes a certain amount of energy, doesn't it? There's actions and energy, emotional and physical action and energy that gets applied over a period of time to create anything that we might look back upon and say that was culture. Now let's consider these great cultures. The Roman Empire, feudal Japan, the Renaissance era, or even contemporary American culture. Now again, if we can all agree that creating a culture requires energy, whether it's great cultures like these, corporate culture, group or department culture, team culture, maybe on a project, or how about family culture, requires energy, then I think it's fair to ask 3 things. Where does that energy come from? Where do we find it? How do we collect it and channel it in a certain direction? And then how do we make sure that it's applied in that direction, that positive vector, if you will, for enough time for it to actually have the effects that it needs to have in creating and building a culture? The answer to all of these questions is vision. Vision really provides the energy that's necessary to create and sustain culture. Now let's talk about energy, specifically potential energy. Potential energy is kind of that energy that's stored and waiting for something to do, right? Hasn't actually been transformed or transferred into some type of other form or leverage for any type of an action. Now, I personally don't believe that you can create energy. I know some folks say vision creates energy. You cannot create energy. I guess you could say that I subscribe to the law of conservation of energy, which basically says energy is not created, it's not destroyed, it's transferred, it's transformed, it is stored or lies dormant, but all the energy that ever exists or ever will exist actually is lying in potential or is being used today. Now, show of hands. How many of you are familiar with the Big Bang Theory? Come on, I can see you all out there. Now, I'm not talking about the television sitcom. Still all the same hands up? Yeah? So the Big Bang Theory that I'm referring to is that 13.8 billion years ago, all the energy in existence was compressed into one sort of singularity, one intense concentration of potential energy, that energy that's available but not yet put into action. And then bang, all of that energy was released into the universe. And now humanity has been taking that energy and using it to change the world around us since the dawn of humanity. That's what's special about our species, is that with intention, we take action and use energy for specific purposes. Now, the emotional energy that we're all experiencing here today, that exists within us and between us all, that too represents a tremendous amount of potential. We simply have to tap into it with some type of intent, some type of focus. If we pull it together, we harness it, we direct it, and we apply it for a sustained period of time. We have to be consistent with this. then we can have a Big Bang kind of effect on our culture. This is why vision is so crucial, is so important. Now, without vision, that energy may lay dormant as that potential, or worse, it could be haphazardly used or wasted altogether. As leaders, we should all focus on intentionally building vision for our culture. But not just any kind of vision. There's lots of different types of vision out there. What I think we need to create is Big Bang vision. Now, to do that, you need 3 elements. Now, in order to attract enough people and their potential energy to your cause, to your culture, to your purpose, you need to have this vision that's big. It needs to be compelling. It needs to be broad. It needs to be inclusive. It has to connect emotionally with people, doesn't it? It has to touch their hearts, capture their imaginations and some mind share. It has to connect in ways that transcend the actions that we're actually going through day in and day out. Now, as human beings, we all sit here, aren't we overwhelmed with competing demands for our attention? We're really pulled in 1,000 different directions at any given time, isn't that right? We like to think that we can multitask, but let's face it, any meaningful action requires focused energy. We're not truly doing multiple things or applying energy in multiple ways at the same time. So first element of Big Bang vision is that you have to get people's attention. You have to draw them in. And I'd like to share a great example with you. In 1961, our country was in a state of distress. How many people remember 1961? Show of hands. I'm aging you. I'm dating you. Racial tensions were at an all-time high. Cold War was waging. The Soviets were parking missiles 90 miles off of our shore. And there was a great amount of paranoia for the potential for nuclear war, nuclear attack, nuclear fallout. President Kennedy recognized that there was a need to pull the nation together and to create a common vision that we could all subscribe to deal with the fact that we had all of these competing demands placed on us, all this fear. His vision was to put a man on the moon and return him safely to the earth before the decade was out. Let's listen to JFK here.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too. But we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this decade is out, then we must be bold.
Was that a big vision? Was it exciting? Was it magnetic? Do you think it appealed to a broad audience that all Americans could kind of identify with that and even feel an excitement and a sense of pride at the prospect or possibility of being associated with it? I certainly think it did. It really created a unity in addressing these fears that we all had, but also at the same time, getting our competitive juices flowing, one of the things that Americans are well known for. Clearly, he was looking to tap into that. Now, Big Bang Vision ignites that fire in people. It draws a tremendous amount of that potential energy to a common launching pad. Once gathered, the next step is to make certain that we get the most out of that potential energy and that we focus it and channel it in the right direction so that it can give us that thrust along the right vector to achieving our goals. Now, that brings us to the second element of creating what I like to call Big Bang Vision. And that is that we have to make that vision shared. It's not enough to just gather enough people's attention. We need to address the biggest competing demands for our energy. That biggest competing demand is the survival instinct. Our brains perceive a threat, and we expend energy. Would everybody agree with that? Physically, we have the fight or flight instinct where we start to sweat, our heart rates go up, our respiration goes up. Or emotionally, we expend a lot of energy when we're in those types of situations. Maybe we're lost and alone, and we don't have a GPS with us anymore. Or we're walking in to have that difficult conversation with somebody at work, and you can kind of feel that emotional energy that's in the room when that happens, right? We've all experienced that. When we do not feel safe, we involuntarily use energy. In fact, we use an awful lot of energy. Now, in the workplace, there's really two things that you need in order for employees to feel safe and secure. The first, they need to feel like there's a future for the organization or for where they are. There has to be some place that the organization is actually going. And we saw the compelling vision that Kennedy shared. That certainly was painting a picture for a future. Not for today, but for years to come, 10 years out, in fact. The second is that future, we need to feel like it includes us, like we're a part of it. If we want to tap into the most energy available from our people, we have to overcome that competing demand for self-preservation, and we have to make our people feel safe. That's done through shared vision. Now, there's some interesting scientific evidence to support the fact that when people feel safe, they actually have more energy at their disposal. That when two people are doing the same task or sharing in the work, they can actually accomplish more than twice the work of one. I want to share one of those studies with you. There's a researcher by the name of James Cohn, who is the director of the Affective Neuroscience Lab at the University of Virginia. And he and others have been researching this concept known as metabolic load sharing. Numerous experiments have been conducted, but the one I'd like to call your attention to I think is really interesting. So the experiment goes like this. A hiker is sitting at the bottom of a trail at a mountain. And researchers there, they bring him a backpack and say, your mission is to bring this backpack to the top of the trail. Put the backpack on. Question, how much does the backpack weigh? The hiker says, I think it weighs 40 pounds. Looking at this trail, what do you think the grade of incline is? What percent incline is that? Looks about a 15% incline. Next step, same hiker taken around the backside of the mountain, different trail, but now a colleague is actually brought to him, a friend, somebody he likes that he can relate to, and says, you're going to accomplish this mission together. Take the backpack off, give it to your friend. That person puts the backpack on. New backpack for the first hiker. How much does that backpack weigh? 25 pounds. What's the grade of that slope you're about to climb? 10%. In actuality, the backpack was still 40 pounds. The grade was 15% yet again. But because this individual felt safe and was sharing in this work with somebody else, the amount of energy that was wasted on self-preservation or feeling unsafe was less, and so there was more energy to be applied to the task. Now, do we think that the race to the moon vision that was shared had the same kind of effect? Many of us were not feeling very safe at the time. But there was an appeal to a bigger vision that, by the way, was outside of all the Cold War stuff. It was outside of racial tensions. It was someplace else for us to focus. And that made us feel like there was a future, we could all be included in it, and we were safe. Shared vision is about including everybody. That the work we will do, we're not going to be doing alone. We're in it together, right? It's making people realize, and this is very important, it's making people realize that their personal successes and the group's success are actually one and the same. That's the big trick. When successful at creating shared vision, we'll have harnessed more energy than we thought was possible out of our people. And instead of people expending that energy on self-preservation, it'll be focused in a common direction. Now, the final element of creating this big bang vision is that we have to make it constant. Vision is so much more than one amazing speech, even one as amazing as Kennedy's. In fact, studies show that less than 20% of people will subscribe to or buy into a vision based upon that one great speech or message, no matter how phenomenal that speech or message was. Big bang vision has to be repeated and reinforced at every turn. Has to be infused into everything that we do. The big things, as well as all of the small and minute things. It has to become a part of it. It should inspire our actions such that they potentially have much longer term impact. Could be years, could be decades, could be generations. Let's take our race to the moon example again. In his speech, you didn't hear it here today, but I'm going to quote Kennedy. He noted that this is an act of faith and vision, for we know not what benefits await us. It wasn't just about going to the moon. There were many other things that were likely to happen as a result of doing that. That vision served to organize and measure the best in us, the best in Americans, for purposes of aggressively driving progress and innovation, didn't it? In fact, if not for the race to the moon, we might not have satellite TV or satellite radio. Where would we be if we couldn't actually listen to Howard Stern anywhere on the planet, right? We also wouldn't have CAT or MRI imaging, truly revolutionized diagnostics for healthcare, right? These technologies were actually developed in order to find weaknesses in the structural integrity of components that were being used in going to space. We wouldn't have selfies, so Chris would not have been able to sit up here and actually take his selfie at the beginning of the day today. The intense focus on miniaturization of technology so that we could fit as much as possible onto these spacecraft without having to add more and more and more thrust made it such that there were significant advancements in things like camera technologies that ultimately are manifest in the cell phones you all have in front of you today. Atmospheric visibility via satellite revolutionized our ability to predict and react to the weather, and actually spawned, instead of just sort of your local weather bureau, we now have NOAA. The first ever joystick, I don't know how many of you knew this, the first ever joystick was actually used on the lunar rover. There's another distraction or competing demand for our attention, our energies, right? That gaming stuff. And now, show of hands. We all have that friend. How many of you have that friend whose car is spotless? Come on, you all have that friend. Think of who that person is. My friend is in the room right now. He knows who he is. They pull into their garage every night, and they actually vacuum their floor mats. You could eat off of their floor mats. That person would not be able to do that and would have missed out on the greatest invention in their lifetime, the cordless dustbuster, if not for the space race. The reality is that cordless tools like that, battery-operated tools, were all created, or that started so that we could conduct work on the lunar surface away from the lunar lander. And finally, without the race to the moon, we would never have had Tang. Show of hands, how many of you remember Tang and the cool commercials? That kind of were appealing to us all to drink what the astronauts drink, right? It was kind of cool. A constant vision permeates the entire organization. Every role, every activity, every initiative. It's present in every single thing that we do, and we need to be reinforcing that. Whether we're verbally saying it or it's got to be in our minds when we're actually going about planning for and executing on the biggest or the smallest of things. It has to be continuously reinforced, repeated, so that we ensure that all of that energy that we've attracted and unleashed along this right vector, right, that's given us the lift to get off the launching pad. We want it to continue to keep us on course. Big Bang vision is that constant and is kind of like a guiding star for our culture. It helps us to navigate even when we're going through uncharted waters. Now, the effects of JFK's vision transcended the goal of landing on the moon, which, by the way, some may say was a conspiracy. We didn't land on the moon. It was all done in a television studio. But on July 20th of 1969, we achieved the goal of landing on the moon and safely returning before the decade was out. While that goal was achieved, that vision still affects us today, doesn't it? So let's recap a little bit. Creating Big Bang vision to fuel your culture is all about attracting as much potential energy as possible by capturing the hearts and minds of your people. This is done by making that vision big. It's about tapping into as much of that potential energy that is within and between us all by making your people feel that there is a future, that it includes them, and making them feel safe and in it together. This is done by making that vision shared. And finally, making it certain that everybody stays the course and that people are re-energized, that this energy is recycled, and that the culture has staying power requires that we make it constant. Now, it's important to note that creating Big Bang vision to fuel your culture is not, I can't stress this enough, it is not a one-time thing. In fact, it's actually a discipline that is continuously practiced. Yet that discipline doesn't happen unless it gets started. Would you all agree? This is where you all come in. Whether leading an organization, leading a department, leading a team, leading your family, for that matter, what people want most out of their leaders versus out of their peers or coworkers or colleagues, what they want most is vision. That is your great challenge, creating that vision. By the way, it's also your greatest opportunity. As a leader, you must become the genesis for this Big Bang vision to fuel culture. You have to create that momentum. I encourage each and every one of you to go where no man has gone before in creating culture that is unique to your organization. Take that first step, and you'll be amazed at where it takes you and your people.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I want to thank you all for sharing your energy with me and with us this morning, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.